Broadcasting to the Wizarding World since 2008.
HPANA's official Harry Potter podcast.
Official Harry Potter podcast.
This is Hogwarts Radio. This is Hogwarts Radio, episode 223 for November 25th, 2018. Hogwarts Radio is HPANA.com's podcast discussing all things Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts, and the rest of the Wizarding World. For the quickest up-to-date news on the franchise, make sure you check out HPANA.com. Hello, everyone, and this is Hogwarts Radio, broadcasting to Harry Potter fans worldwide since 2008. I'm Terrance Pinkston.
And I'm Gretchen Rush. Our show can be found virtually anywhere online, such as iTunes, the Google Podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, and other places where podcasts are aggregated.
It doesn't matter where or how you listen, just make sure to tap the subscribe button, and we guarantee you'll have a new episode each Sunday.
We also invite you to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram so you never miss an update from the show.
Don't forget, Hogwarts Radio is also on Patreon. By pledging, you'll have instant access to many benefits, including exclusive merchandise, host vlogs, behind-the-scenes planning of the show, Hogshead Radio, and much more. Visit patreon.com/HogwartsRadio to sign up today. Welcome to episode 223. I feel like it's the morning after. It's kind of been a long week. But nonetheless, we're here. I still have that Crimes of Grindelwald, what the heck happened hangover, as I'm sure most of us do, but we've had about a week to digest it, and we're going to jump into it here in just a bit. But this week, we're joined by Lizzie Sudlow from over there at MuggleNet.com. So, hi, Lizzie. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, Hogwarts Radio. It's great to be here.
So, we'll get the formalities with the fandom. I think that's what we're going to start calling this little introduction here out of the way. So, what's your house?
It's a bit of a story, but I'll try to keep it as short and sweet as possible. I very much struggle between a hat stall of Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, primarily because when I took my Pottermore sortings, my first one, the end of high school, I was sorted into Ravenclaw, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it was a bit of an identity crisis because I always felt like I was a Gryffindor. And then I retook the test when I was graduating college, and it sorted me into Gryffindor. So then I went back into the identity crisis of, was I right all along? Essentially, I was two very different people, high school and college. So I really need to take that test for a third final time and hope it doesn't give me any other house so I can settle it. But very much hat stall currently.
Interesting.
But my favorite Potter book would definitely be Prisoner of Azkaban. It's just, I very much love the Marauders and their backstory, and I itch for more on a daily basis. In terms of a favorite film, though, I was watching Deathly Hallows Part 1 on Thanksgiving, and I realized how much I enjoy that film, and I hadn't really seen it in a while. So right now it's Deathly Hallows Part 1, but my favorite character has to be Ginny, Book Ginny, of course. You know, justice for Ginny all day, every day. My Patronus is a Manx cat, which just basically means it's a cat with like a little stub of a tail. And then my Ilvermorny house is Wampus.
Interesting. We've never had anybody with a Wampus house on the show.
I know nothing about Wampus.
I know nothing about Wampus also. You're in good company here.
Yeah, it's fine.
And do you have a Hogwarts pet that you would take along, or would you just like, no, I don't have to take a pet?
I would have a pet. I would have had an owl, but now I've had a cat for about like 3-4 months now, and now I feel like I would have a cat, but I also feel like an owl is more practical, so I'm very split. Can I have two? Can I have two cats? Can I have two pets?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean,
Sure.
Then I would have both. An owl and a cat.
Why not have 3? Get a toad. They can all be friends. Okay, and if you played Quidditch, what position would you play?
I have no idea. Probably a chaser, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not bad. We've had quite a few chasers on this show. You know, it seems like and I don't think I'm really making this up, but everybody that we've had on from MuggleNet says that they would be a chaser. What's going on over there?
I just don't think I would succeed as a seeker, and I think I'd be too intimidated to be a beater, and I'm just not a good goalie. I was never a good goalie, so I can't be a keeper.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Narrow your options down, and chasers aren't bad. They're right there in the midst of the action, trying to score as many points as they can. But Lizzie, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I think we're going to have a full show for everybody. We're going to dive into more Crimes of Grindelwald discussion. But first, can you imagine, just like I'm going to set the scene here. Imagine a Muggle pub, like at night. Jacob, who's on his fifth pint of the evening, just tipsy enough for loose lips. And he's sitting there and he goes, "You'll never believe what happened with my girl." And then some handsome stranger, mid-20s, walks in. His name is Tom Riddle. And he goes, "Bro."
They have a lot in common now.
They do, right?
It's unfortunate.
I saw this as a tweet a few days ago or so, and it kind of blew my mind because it's like something that could really happen. And we're talking, of course, Tom Riddle Sr., not Tom Riddle Jr., because he was a year old at this time.
I can't hear the name Tom Riddle Sr. without thinking of a Harry Potter senior year. When he's like, "Dude, Mom, get him out of here. I hate him." It's hysterical. If you guys haven't seen it, you have to go see it. I can't remember the actor's name. I want to say it's Chris something, but he's hysterical.
But yeah, it was very interesting to me because it's something that could really have happened, I could just imagine Jacob sitting there with shots of gilly water. Not gilly water. What was it? Giggle water, right?
Yes, giggle water.
Giggle water, just taking the shots of the giggle water and just kind of laughing in between, crying in between that. Poor Jacob. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. That was funny. Well, again, this week is going to be centered around Crimes of Grindelwald, as is most of our episodes for the remaining part of the year. So we've got a fair bit of news to get to, and Gretchen, you've got some box office numbers for us.
Yes, I do. So these numbers come from Box Office Mojo, and they say at number 1, Warner Bros. Release of Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald fell a bit short of the studio's anticipated $65 million debut, with an estimated $62 million from 4,163 theaters and $13 million shy of the debut for the first film.
This is a big drop. $13 million. Let the magnitude of that sink in for just a moment. $13 million. What could you do with $13 million? So imagine what a studio could do with $13 million. That's a huge missed opportunity. And I kind of noticed this whenever my theater wasn't even full. I went and saw it on opening night, and it just wasn't, there were 100 seats in the auditorium, and it wasn't even full. So that kind of made me wonder, is this movie, I was starting to second guess everything. Is this movie going to have trouble like we had anticipated? Whenever I got out to the parking lot, I was really scared because I saw the movie at 10:15, right? So we got out probably about 12:30-ish. Maybe 12:45, and the midnight showings at that point were in full swing. Well, the parking lot of the movie theater wasn't even full. Compared to movies in the past, like the Potter films and the first Fantastic Beasts film, I remember having to park in a completely different parking lot, a completely different area, and walking to the movie theater. And so that's whenever I first started to notice and started to kind of think, well, is this movie going to do as well as we thought it was going to?
You don't think Warner Brothers kind of did it to themselves, though?
Oh, I think, yeah.
They canceled their U.S. premiere. So they're sure, they did some press, but their biggest chunk, so to speak, they canceled. We still don't know why. They did all these fan screenings ahead of time, not the ones where it was the fandom events where you were, paying for your admission, but they did all these screenings where they were letting in, hundreds of people for free. And they're doing that because they were afraid probably of what critics were going to say. If you notice, all of their posters essentially are covered in tweet reviews, not critics. And if it is critics, it's very vague, random critics. And I mean, they didn't help themselves with all of this.
You know, they really tried like a new method of marketing, and they thought that they could reach a different part of the Potter audience that they had never reached before, that they've always had an opportunity with. They've always relied like on the fan sites to kind of influence this. Well, they've actually used influencers this movie. We've talked about this last week, but they were using like YouTube stars and Instagram influencers and like big name social media people that they knew that these people that you know, the general Potter audience would either watch or would engage with. And I don't really think that helped them out either.
Now, I work in social media. I am a social media manager in Manhattan, and I did not see a single influencer post about this film. And I mean, maybe the only one I saw, and that's because I was already following him, was Potter Collector. But I know him, I've met him, we've had conversations, so that wasn't new for me, and that didn't surprise me. So if they were trying to reach Potter fans by reaching out to these influencers, I have no idea what kind of people they were trying to target, because unless they were going to go and like put money behind their posts to go and target Potter fans, or unless they were just trying to reach new users in general to go and see the film, I don't know if that even works, because it's kind of hard to walk into this film without seeing Fantastic Beasts, you know? Mm-hmm. And who was going to invest in that ahead of time?
You know, I feel like they really missed their mark. They tried a new way of bringing people in, and it just I don't know what they were thinking. Like, I mean, I know what they were thinking. They were thinking, well, if we can get people to help us, you know, promote the brand,
right?
Then, you know, they're more likely, if they see that these people that they follow are like highly engaged, and that they are posting like all these pictures and these advertisements for the studio and for the movie, well, they're more likely, this is the studio's way of thinking, they're more likely to go and check it out and see what all the buzz has been about. I remember a couple of weeks ago, Tessa Netting and Anna Breezy Voices, who we both had on the show before, they both got to meet J.K. Rowling, along with, like, was it 50 other YouTube stars or something like that to help promote this movie?
Which I think is ridiculous. Now, I don't condemn WB. I really applaud them for trying something new, because they were essentially trying to beat the curve, so to speak, because they knew they weren't going to get, or maybe they didn't know, but they might have had an inkling that they weren't going to get the best reviews from critics. So they were like, but if we can flood the internet with reviews from, you know, positive fans, that's going to help, you know, middle things out. So I absolutely applaud them for that. I completely understand where they were coming from. It was very clever, very smart. But the idea of J.K. Rowling inviting random YouTube stars to go meet her, I hope they were Potter fans. I hope they all were. I know Tessa Netting is just, you know, she's all over the place. So of course, she makes sense to meet JKR, but like, let's not start taking opportunities away from proper fans just for the sake of marketing, you know?
And I think that
just kind of leaves a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth.
Absolutely. I think that was my point last week as well. And I think I had made the point where I saw on my Instagram feed a person who's an influencer who had never posted a single piece of Potter content or Fantastic Beasts content. And I saw them just suddenly post out of the blue about this movie. And then, of course, they used the hashtag sponsored Warner Brothers ad, you know, whatever it was. And that kind of upset me a little bit. What I wanted to ask you, Lizzie, what do you think they were trying this new tactic? Like, why not rely on the fan sites like they've done in the past? I mean, is our relationship with Warner Brothers strained to the point where they're not as trusting of the fan sites because they're realizing how much power the fans actually have, and they're just kind of getting tired of you know, that kind of control that we have?
I think, well, first of all, just really quickly to finish up on that point about the influencer that had never posted Potter before, that's exactly where they went wrong. Because I do, and to listeners, I apologize if I sound a little snobby, but this is literally my job every single day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5:30. when I work with influencers, if I go reach out to somebody that does not make sense for my client's audience, I'm throwing money away to work with these people because it's not going to fit on their feed. It's not going to relate to their audience. And it's going to be so obvious that this was something paid for, that is not organic, that is not authentic, that it's just a money grab. So that, if Warner Brothers wants some help, they can call me. But what I think the issue with fan sites is that fan sites were very powerful before Pottermore started. And Pottermore originally was supposed to act as like the cop-out encyclopedia that J.K. Rowling always said that she was going to write.
The companion. Yeah.
Right. And then Pottermore all of a sudden turned into a fan site, essentially. But it's supposed to be the most elitist fan site because it's directly associated with Joe, and it's directly associated with Warner Brothers, so to speak, in a number of ways. And for Warner Brothers to start relying back on other fan sites and take some of that power away from Pottermore, I guess it's just a little confusing on the branding of the Wizarding World for them to do that. And also, fan sites, they can't be bought off the same way that an influencer can. Fans are going to post their own authentic, genuine reactions, so there's no guarantee they're going to get a positive review. Sure, you're going to get fans will enjoy the film, and you're going to get the hype, and it's going to reach the audience they're looking for, but fan sites can't really make money off of Harry Potter because it's Harry Potter, and it's not our domain. Not the same way that Pottermore can make money off of Harry Potter because it's directly associated with the franchise. So you can't go say, like, we'll invite you to see the film, but we really need you to write a positive review, because there's nothing to hold us to that, if that makes sense.
Right.
And I think that's part of the reason that relationships with WB has started to, distance themselves a little bit, is knowing that it's still a gamble with fan sites on what kind of reactions and what kind of reviews you're going to get. Thankfully, most fan sites are large enough that there's enough people to get a wide array of reviews. You're going to get, I loved it, I think there were problems, I really didn't like it, and you're going to get the same site, but you don't know what you're going to get initially. And I think it's the initial reviews that are what's going to make or break you.
The thing with fan sites is you are getting the most honest reviews. You're getting,
Yes.
You're getting reviews directly from the fans. You're not getting, you're getting reviews from Rotten Tomatoes, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. Anyway, but you're going to get the most passionate, honest, organic reviews that you're ever going to get for that particular film, because you're not paying anybody off, because you're coming directly from a source that, it's the fans. You're coming directly from the fans who are passionate about this kind of stuff. And like you said, fans can't be bought. Fans can't be, bought off like that. So, it's very interesting how the relationship with fan sites and Warner Brothers has evolved now, and what Warner Brothers is kind of moving to, and kind of saying, well, the fan sites are here, they have power, sure, but that's the old way, let's bring in the new way. And I really feel like they're struggling to find their footing with what is exactly the new way.
Yeah, and I think another thing that they really had to trapeze their way around was Depp, without going too far into it, because that's not the subject of discussion for this episode. But basically, fan sites reacted a very strong way to Depp. Not everyone, within those sites maybe agreed, but the general stance was one way or the other. And so what was really important was the critics' review, because the critics reviewed Depp very favorably and, very well, and say great things about his performance, and sure, we should just be focusing on the performance. But also then when you go to the fan sites, you might not get that review, especially when it comes to Depp. And I think Depp was a very big part of how this film was recognized.
Well,
and it's just something that it was for hopefully just this film. And now that he's been more involved, we can move along with it and just, look ahead bigger and brighter for the next 3 films. But I think that was also something that was tricky for their marketing to figure out how to get around that.
Well, they realized that they pissed the true fans off early on.
They did.
With the whole Depp thing and with the whole David Yates putting his foot in his mouth about Dumbledore not being explicitly gay, something that he should have tiptoed around. And I'm not going to blame him because I don't feel like he's in tune with the fandom as we are. So I really feel like it was just a bad situation for him to be in, but he really shouldn't have addressed. And it's easy to say that in hindsight. He shouldn't have addressed what it was at that particular point. But I'm not entirely sure that coming back to the original story here, I'm not really sure that is what hurt this movie as far as box office expectations. I think it was just a number of factors, and the fact that this series, and we'll talk about it here in just a minute anyway, is not Harry Potter. It's on its own. It's trying to stand on its own, and there's certain issues with this series that people just had. I'm sorry. There were certain inconsistencies in this series that people had issues with.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, Gretchen, that was a fantastic story. What's next?
All right. We've looked at the numbers. Let's look at the reviews. So just going off of Rotten Tomatoes, they have it right now at 40% rotten. The average rating for the critics is 5.4 out of 10, and that is out of 247 reviews. So of those 247, 98 reviews were fresh, 149 were rotten. And the critics' consensus is Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald has glimmers of the magic familiar to Harry Potter fans, but the story's spell isn't as strong as earlier installments. So 40% rotten for critics. Meanwhile, the audience score, 67% fresh. A lot of people really liked it. The average rating was 3.7 out of 5, and that is out of 8,590 user ratings. So a lot more ratings than the critic reviews.
So these reviews come from critics or fans or audiences?
The audience one is the audience reviews. So those like 8,590. But then the critic ones, the 247, those are I'm guessing random critic sites,
Okay. So I have an issue with Rotten Tomatoes in general. I mean, sure, Deathly Hallows was 93% fresh or something like that. One of the highest, right? But and this is what I don't like about critics and the Fantastic Beasts films is they can't separate it from Harry Potter, and they think that the success of Harry Potter has to continue, when in fact this is a completely different part of the franchise and a completely different story altogether. And I still feel like they're trying to compare it to the magic of Harry Potter, and obviously it's not going to have that same kind of effect. But 5.4 out of 10, that's barely over 50%. It's 40% rotten. Like 149 of these reviews are poor. It makes me kind of think, what are they looking for? What is it in this movie that they just couldn't accept? Was it the way it was shot? Was it the dialogue? Was it the cinematography? Was it the music? Like, why did 149 critics say, no, this is not a good movie?
And this is the first of the films in the whole franchise to get a rotten score. All of the other ones are fresh. The first Fantastic Beasts one was 74% fresh, and that critics' consensus was Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them draws on Harry Potter's rich mythology to deliver a spin-off that dazzles with franchise-building magic all its own. So that makes me think that you're right. They are kind of looking for Harry Potter and then not finding it and deciding that it's just not as good.
Do you two think, had this film series existed, and it would be impossible, but let's just roll with the idea here. If it had existed without the Potter branding, without the Wizarding World branding, that it would be doing better? If there was no direct link?
Yes, I do.
I don't know, because I think first it's hard because since it's a J.K. Rowling piece, it naturally people are going to compare. But what's hard and why it's not fair to compare is I feel like the second film really has that movie 2 syndrome, where it's not necessarily the filler movie, but it's now you know the characters. Now we're going to introduce a couple of more characters, and we're really going to set up the next couple of films for you. So in a way, it is the filler, but there's no filler movie in the Potter series, and there's no filler movie because they originally were books, and they were books that were then taken and changed into screenplays, and they were already thought out. And while yes, Joe claims to have a plan on how this is all going to play out, and we know how the film series is going to end, she's still writing these screenplays film by film, and they're screenplays first, and then she's publishing them as screenplays. And I don't know if you both have had the chance to read it, but when I read the screenplay, it made me realize how more successful it would have done as a book. And I think that's another thing that's hard, is they expect, at least, and when I say they, the reviewers and the critics, they just expect it to go up, 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 up. Whereas it was only able to go up, up, up because so much was already laid out, and there was so much of a foundation where Joe is going bit by bit here. So it's not always going to be perfect on the first go because she hasn't necessarily had all that fine tuning as she would have if it was a novel series.
And look, ideally, I believe that if it was adapted from a book series first, the Fantastic Beasts films, if it was adapted from book to film, I think we would have had a lot more issues with it going into it. Not only would Warner Brothers have like a controversy with the casting and with the explicitness of certain characters, but I also feel like that would have added to like, oh, they cut this part. This was left on the cutting room floor. This scene didn't even make it, and they completely butchered this book. And I just feel like there would have been a lot more issues. Sure, it would have been more information for us, and we would have been able to dissect it and, kind of make sense of certain things, and maybe theorize a little better. But I'm not entirely sure it would be more successful if it was adapted from a book series to the film.
I only think it would be more successful as a film series if it came from a book, because the critics are not reading the books and saying in their reviews, oh, but they cut this part. It would have been more aggravating for fans, yes, but I think it would have been better reception for critics, because the stuff that screenplays, the screenwriters would have been cutting, they would have been cutting it for film, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. I mean, because we've been through it before with the Potter series, and I hoped if we did get these as books first and then adapted to a film, that they would have taken some of the things they would have learned from the Harry Potter series, like not to screw it up like they did with Goblet of Fire, like completely like off their rocker with Goblet of Fire. And I feel like they did learn a little bit, but they would have transitioned a lot of that and applied some, new things to the Fantastic Beasts film series. I mean, even though, yeah, you're always going to have issues with a book to film adaptation, right? With every single book to film adaptation, because there are difficult decisions that have to be made on what to keep in, what to cut, what to explain, how to explain it if you're cutting and pasting certain things. So, I just feel like it would, it would have created more issues. They would have learned from it. I feel like they would have done it justice, but I don't know if it would have been just as successful as it is now. What I wanted to ask is, do we feel like the rest of the series is in jeopardy? Because what I've been reading, I've been spending a lot of time like on Reddit and different fan sites and in different discussion groups on Facebook. people feel like the series itself could be in jeopardy from this poor performance.
I think the only thing protecting it is the fact that Joe opened her mouth and said it was going to be 5, and Warner Brothers was like, yep, it's going to be 5, and it's pretty locked in right now. And I think that's the only thing, like, any safety net it has at this point.
And I completely agree. I mean, they have the backing of 9, now at this point, 9 successful films. I don't know if they would write this as a success. It's still making money. I would say it's, it's making money. It's still making its money. It's going to make its money. As long as they can meet what they spent on it, I call that a win. But I feel like, if they didn't have the backing of those previous films, of those 9 previous films, yeah, it could definitely be in jeopardy. But this is a brand that has a lot of power behind it. I mean, for God's sakes, there's a theme park about it. And so many more different media types about the wizarding world in general. So while I feel like, even though this movie might have had a lower than expected rating, a lower than expected performance, a lower than expected turnout at the theaters, personally, I don't feel like it's put the series in a tight spot to be considered of, being in jeopardy at all.
Out of 9 movies at this point, only 1 has earned any kind of Oscar, and it was for costume design. Crimes of Grindelwald is not going to win many awards, I don't think. And I apologize if I'm coming across super negative, but based on the reviews, I'm not anticipating much here. And since it is J.K. Rowling, and since it is Potter, and since it is Warner Brothers, what I can only see that they'll just scale back a little bit. Like, maybe they won't do as many premieres to save some money, or maybe, they'll just cut the budget for the next film a little bit or something like that. I'm not really sure. Of course, I'm not in those rooms where those conversations are occurring, but they're going to keep going because they know they're still going to make money off of the fans. And as long as they have enough fans, they'll be able to continue with the series. But I think they also essentially know where they stand, where they're not making these films for Oscars. They're making these films for fans, and because J.K. Rowling has a story she wants to tell.
Yeah, totally agree with you. All right, Gretchen, what's next?
The book we talked about a little bit. Well, I guess it's not really a book. It's an audio book narrated by Dan Fogler. It's called Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald, Makers, Mysteries, and Magic. We talked about it a few weeks ago when it was announced. It has now come out. I have not heard any of it yet. Terrance, have you?
I have. I've listened to a little bit of it. And I do want to play a sample for you guys.
Awesome.
On what this is. It's an official audio documentary, but it's kind of different. So you're just going to have to listen. Let's take a listen here.
Hold your nose.
We had to just think of something that is about the size of an elephant, but a bit horsey as well.
Beast poo.
We tried mixing nuts in and mud and a bit of straw just to try and get that sort of look. So yeah, you really never know what you're going to end up doing.
I did say you'd be getting the full behind-the-scenes experience, folks. And I do like to keep my promises, even if it means getting to the bottom of things. Because if there is one thing you need to know about the making of this movie, it's the sheer amount of detail that goes into every single element, as you're about to find out. This is Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald. Makers, Mysteries, and Magic.
So very fun. Very, very fun little read. If you have the chance, go to Audible and pick it up. It's only like $30, I think it is, but it's 5 hours and 12 minutes. It has a 3-star rating right now out of 147 ratings. And the only issue that I kind of have with this is that I'm more of a visual guy. So like I like it, but I'm not quite sure how it works. Like we've listened to the sample and I feel like I have like Netflix on in the background while I'm doing something. So to fully consume and understand this book, I need some sort of visual representation.
I gotta say that music was a little much. What was up with that music?
I don't know, but it's fun. I mean, if you've ever listened to an audiobook before, and I love audiobooks, that's how I read a lot, because it's easy to listen to. I can go back and forth and in the car, and while I'm at the store, I can listen while I'm shopping around and things like that. But this one I'm having a hard time just visualizing.
This to me sounds less like an audiobook and more like a podcast almost. Like I'm picturing Dan Fogler walking around with his microphone and just doing behind the scenes stuff. So I'm pretty intrigued. I think it sounds super fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure as I listen to it a little more, I mean, it's only 5 hours long. It's a very quick read for an audiobook, because most audiobooks are like 20, 30, 40, 50 hours. So I feel like, this is something that I could do maybe in a long afternoon or over the course of 2 days. It does sound fun. I just don't know if I would be able to do it. It'd be interesting to learn about like the different types of things that goes into making the Crimes of Grindelwald film, because as I said, there's a lot of detail, and for me that's the visual part. Like, I wish I could see it. That's the thing. Okay, so let's move on to our final couple of topics here in the news. They're not necessarily stories, but it's kind of what we've talked about in the past about this movie. And now there's a couple of editorials and essays that are and opinion pieces that are being posted on MuggleNet right now by a particular author called HP Boy 13. And this person really had an issue with the Crimes of Grindelwald film. And some of the points are pretty valid. I've read through a couple of the articles. I haven't really taken a deep dive into all of them yet, but I will. But I do want to talk about them, not in detail, just to kind of glaze over really where this particular fan is coming from. And HP Boy makes it very clear in his articles he does not represent MuggleNet, so the opinions are not that of the site. What I want to say about these articles in general and about this author in general is that what people need to understand is this movie series, this part of the franchise, is not Harry Potter. It's completely different. And once that separation is understood, the easier it is to accept these films as they are. We have absolutely no context behind these movies. We don't know what's going to happen other than what we can already theorize about. There's no backstory. There's no book-to-film adaptation. We've only been exposed to one single part of this wizarding world, and now we're in the process of being introduced to another. We need to stop taking all this basic introduction to magic in the Harry Potter series as the final definitive say of what happens in this world. Remember, the Harry Potter series was from one person's point of view, one person who is introduced to the world at 11 years old, much as we were. There's another article. It is no longer our choices, the mediocrity of Crimes of Grindelwald. I'm not going to deep dive into this article, but I will agree with this author on one point throughout his entire essay series. What we do over here at the podcast is theorize and analyze based off of certain events and how they correspond with the timeline of the series. Once you start messing with that, once you start changing and dropping names for the sake of dropping names, because let's face it, to fans of this film, that's exactly what happened with Minerva McGonagall. It changes everything. Once you start manipulating canon like that, it changes everything. We can no longer rely on canon to break down the series, and that's a very frightening thing. It literally makes our jobs obsolete over here at the podcast and as fans. The writing and the events in this series going forward need to be checked, double-checked, and triple-checked in order to avoid any anomalies. Otherwise, what the hell are we doing here? It's okay to not like the Crimes of Grindelwald. It's okay to not like the Fantastic Beasts film series. That's fine. Like I said, people need to understand it's not the world that we were exposed to. This world is so much larger, and we only had one small piece of it, one small piece of the pie. Now we're getting a larger piece. We still don't have everything yet because we don't know everything about the wizarding world. So things are going to change, and it's okay if if people aren't comfortable with that change. It's okay to like only one certain part and disagree with the rest.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how I feel about that. I'm not sure that I struggle to separate it as much as I'm struggling to separate Joe from it, I guess. I think I have such high expectations of Joe and her work, and knowing that she's the sole screenwriter on this newest film, and then what we were given, it felt like a tiny bit of a letdown to me. But it's not something, like you said, it's not something I'm gonna freak out over. It's not something that's ruined Harry Potter for me. It's you take what you take and you leave what you leave, you know? So if you have a problem with something, I didn't love that McGonagall was in it, but I'm not gonna condemn the whole film because of it.
Right. I think something we forget sometimes is we didn't have to have this film series. You know, there was no obligation for them to go do this. You know, sure, Joe wanted to share this story and it's great, but I think sometimes we forget that the series theoretically was supposed to end after Deathly Hallows, and we're just lucky to even be getting new information, and maybe some of that information is flawed and it's not perfect, and there's some confusion and things that I would love explained, but we didn't have to have any of this at all. We would have never known that there was a Queenie Goldstein, and what a sad world that would have been, right?
I agree. This is not our world. This is not our story. This is not our series. This is J.K. Rowling's world. This is something that she has shared with us, that she knows she is the end-all, be-all of the wizarding world because the story is coming directly from her. And I think people have forgotten that. I think that people feel entitled that because they've invested so much of their lives, and, you know, to a point, rightly so, you know, but I feel like they think that they own this world, and we're just along for the ride. We're just along for the journey, and that's it.
And if you don't want to be on the ride, get off. It's okay. No one's going to penalize you. Hopefully you have friends that aren't going to stop being friends with you, but you should be enjoying it for what it is, and don't sweat it too much. I mean, there are plenty of issues I have with this film, and there's so many things I would love explained if I could sit JKR down in a room, but we also still have 3 films to go, and we have no reference material on how it's going to go, except for, you know, those bits and pieces that we know for the ending, as in the duel between Grindelwald and Dumbledore, and that Newt and Tina get married. So let's not, you know, jump down people's throats too quickly when we still have 3 films to go.
And I think that people want this to be Harry Potter so bad that they are having a hard time with that separation. I mean, and rightly so. They want to relive the glory days, right? I mean, we've all done it at one point where we reminisce with our friends, like on the way that things used to be. And some people have a harder time letting go than others. And I feel like now that we have these new movies, people are like, oh, great, we have new Harry Potter films. You know, we have new exposure to the wizarding world, and they just want it to be something that it's not going to be. It's not going in the direction that they want it to go in. And that's what they're having the hard time with. They're like, well, I don't like this. And it's okay, like you said, Lizzie, it's okay to not like it. It's fine to get off the ride and enjoy it for what it was. You don't have to consume everything that's coming your way, even though the temptation's there and you really want to. And it's hard not to, you know. It's hard to just kind of like separate that part and say, you know what, that was a good part of the ride. I'm glad that I experienced it, you know, and just kind of move on from there. And I feel like people just want their, you know, they just want to relive that. They want the good old days of book releases and, you know, midnight movie releases and going to conventions with their friends and just kind of reliving that part of their lives. And that's certainly not the way that things are happening now. One thing that does bother me, though, is the inconsistencies in canon. I wouldn't mind it as much if it came from, I mean, I would. I'm not going to lie. I would kind of give it a pass a little bit if it was coming from a different author that was writing the series. But this is coming from J.K. Rowling that we know has boxes and boxes upon notes of the wizarding world and even the Harry Potter films whenever she was writing the books. What's to say she's not doing the same thing now, where she has just like, you know, mounds of paper everywhere in trying to write these screenplays.
To go back to the McGonagall thing, I just don't understand what happened there. Like, did someone say to her, it'd be really nice to have a cameo, can you put someone in here? Or did she think, oh, this will be a cool Easter egg and timeline be damned? Like, I really, really would like to hear a statement from her about logically why McGonagall is in there for those 2-second scenes.
And I hope we get it, because she's not going to say it now. They're probably going to wait another 2 weeks till the film's been out for about a month before she'll actually start speaking about the film. But yeah, that is the one thing that I really would like an explanation on, because it makes no sense. And if they really wanted that cameo and that Easter egg, they did it with McLaggen. They had it. That was
I love that one. I love the McLaggen one. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Like that, fine. Made sense. The McGonagall thing, no. It could have been any other Scottish woman professor. Literally. Or, you know what? Would have even better, and I could have totally ignored it and been okay with it, if they hadn't said her name. If she was just an unnamed professor and she just sounded like McGonagall and people wanted to think that it was McGonagall, I would have been like, sure, go ahead. Agree to disagree. You can say that's McGonagall. If they hadn't put a name on it, I almost would have been okay with it as well.
You know, what we know is that J.K. Rowling always has a reason for everything that she does. There's a reason behind everything that she does. Every character, every kind of name drop, every single action in this in the Potter series, we know from her writing. So I've been reading things online that are saying that McGonagall is going to have more of a presence in these films, like in the third film and the fourth film, just from discussions from people at the studio that have been having those conversations. So I feel like, okay, she did it. She introduced us, kind of made us think, what the heck? And, something's going to happen to where it's going to be a logical reason why McGonagall is there, I feel. I don't know, it's a stretch. I know it's a stretch, but,
Look, I'll take any explanation.
I don't think we're going to get one from J.K. Rowling. Like, she's not the kind of person to do that unless everything's, like, been said and done. She won't give us an explanation because she feels like that would be giving away part of the story. She's like, well, if I have to explain this, then I have to explain something else, and then I have to explain something else, and I feel like
but
that
I think
would
it would also be okay if she even just said, there is a reason. Like, I think even that would just appease some of us. Just for her to basically say, I'm not crazy. I didn't screw up the math. There's a purpose here. And she might not say it, but, to go back to Depp, she eventually said something there.
Well, she was kind of forced to, I think.
True.
But we would really love to hear your opinions on the anomalies in this series so far and what you really think of, what you've been experiencing and what you've been seeing online. So we invite you to send us an email to staff@hogwartsradio.com. We'll be happy to read it, respond to it, and even read it on the show if we have time to be able to do that. I'm very interested in what other fans are logically thinking. Now, if you're going to send us a hate-filled email saying that, she doesn't need to be writing this series, just save yourself the time. Don't write that, because we won't read that on the show. We want to hear logical arguments and logical thinking, well thought out emails. So please send us that. staff@hogwartsradio.com. Okay, well, now that we've had time to digest the movie for more over the past week and really analyze the screenplay, I did pick up a copy of the screenplay, was reading through it. I want to spend this discussion talking about the major topic that we didn't get to last week, and for specific reason, is it was too long. Aurelius Dumbledore. At the very end of the film, moviegoers were treated to an incredible twist that no one saw coming. Grindelwald revealed that Credence's true identity was, in fact, Aurelius Dumbledore. Initial reaction to that, you guys, what did you think? I was like, what in the hell is this? I mean, my jaw literally did hit the floor, I would have to say. Like, oh my God, another Dumbledore?
So I was positioned perfectly dead center of the theater when I first saw it, and I screamed during the credits, OMG, WTF, but, the full explosive, cursed version of it. And everyone was laughing and loving it because that's what everyone else was thinking. And then living in New York City, I had to navigate myself back to the subway to get to my apartment in Queens. And in between that, I almost got hit by a car. I was just in so much shock. I missed my subway stop. I had to get off and like re-navigate myself. I was a complete broken mess.
Oh my gosh.
For a good 24 hours.
Gretchen, what about you? What were your thoughts on that?
If you could have seen my face, I just was like, my jaw was to the floor, yes. And then my hands were up, kind of like, what? And I just kept saying, what? What? I'm turning to everyone around me and I'm like, what? And my boyfriend's like, wait, what? And I was like, wait, what? And then I'm telling the people in front of me, wait, what? And we were all just like, okay. I was very, very confused. And of course, other people I'm with are like, wait, who's Aurelius Dumbledore? Do we know that character? I'm like, no, we don't know that character. And like freaking out. So I was very confused. I'm still very confused. Things that I've read recently, Ezra Miller's statements and stories of when he was told about the character make me think that it may be true, which I'm hesitant to believe. So I'm very curious as to how this happened and why, and how does this make any sense?
Yeah. My wife was like, I thought his name was Aberforth. I was like, no, the wrong brother.
No, but so when the bird started to transform, that was when I realized what was going to happen. That it was going to be a Dumbledore thing. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, what is going on? And then I was very much afraid that he was going to say Aberforth. And I was like, please don't do this. Please don't. And I was very afraid. Like, it was the first thing that crossed my head. I was like, Aberforth? And then they said Aurelius. And I was like, more confusing, but also thank God. Please.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me, Lizzie. So the thing that Ezra Miller, the story he told, he talked to David Yates, I believe it was, not Heyman.
Yeah, I saw this.
Yeah, it was so funny. So it was like 2 years ago after the first movie, and Yates was like, hey, Ezra, we know who your character is. And he's like, you're a Dumbledore. And Ezra goes, Aberforth? And David's like, yeah. So Ezra's walking around thinking that he's playing Aberforth Dumbledore, and he's a huge Potter fan. So he's like, how does this make any sense? Where does this happen in the timeline? I don't understand. How am I Aberforth? And he goes up to Joe and he's like, Joe, how am I Aberforth Dumbledore? And she goes, you're not Aberforth. Like, you're Aurelius. And he's like, oh. It was so funny. He's walking around thinking he's playing Aberforth Dumbledore because David Yates was like, sure.
Oh, David. Just don't say anything, bud. I'm sorry.
You can really stop talking.
I love you,
I think
David.
it was more of like him being like, I don't really know. This is all that Joe's told me. So, sure.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Sure.
He was like, I'm not really sure. Oh, so good, though.
Aurelius Aberforth. It's the same thing. It's going to be Aurelius Fourth. Aurelius Fourth Dumbledore. So let's talk about how this all came to the audience's attention, right? So we're sitting in the movie, and so we're getting ready to come up to the climactic scene with Grindelwald and his followers and all that stuff. So there's a story. They're in the mausoleum of the Lestranges, and they're getting ready to go into this place where where this rally is being held. So we get the story, and I'm going to go through this to try to make as much sense as we can. So hopefully this makes sense to you guys. A lot of this stuff I took from the screenplay, which you can pick up at your local bookstore, but here it is. Corvus Lestrange Sr. used the Imperious Curse to seduce and abduct Lorena Kama, which is Yusuf's mother. Yusuf runs after them, but Corvus stops him by sending him sprawling. Next, we see Lorena laying on the bed, and Irma carrying a newborn baby swaddled in a blanket and hands it off to Corvus. Yusuf's father went insane and charged Yusuf with killing the person that Corvus loved the most. And Corvus was the kind of person where he didn't care about anybody. He didn't care about Yusuf's mother. He didn't care about the baby that was just born. At first, Yusuf thought it was Lita, but like I said, Corvus never loved her. Corvus remarried less than 3 months later and had another child. This time, it was a son, and he named him Corvus as well. So Corvus Sr. was filled with a love that he had never known. At this point, Credence is like, is that me? Yusuf is like, yeah. And Lita's like, nope. So at this point in the screenplay, it says that Kama turns and looks at Lita. Her eyes are unfocused. These memories have haunted her for years. Realizing that the Lestranges were marked for revenge, Corvus sent the young girl and the newborn baby to America under the care of Irma Dugard, who is a half-elf. Yeah, we're getting to half-elves now. That was in 1901. Now, Irma was to pose as the grandmother with 2 grandchildren. And so baby Corvus, throughout this journey, was always screaming, always crying, so much that it was driving Lita insane. Lita said that she never wanted to hurt him, but just to be free of him for only a moment. So the door that was in the opposite cabin was swung open. And this is the first instance where we're seeing another baby. We're going to call him Baby Credence. Lita has this idea and swaps the babies. And this is where it really gets confusing, y'all. The weather started getting rough. The tiny ship was tossed. If not for the courage of the fearless crew, the minnow would be lost. No, I'm just kidding. The ship began to experience some sort of emergency, which was making it sink. So Irma grabs baby Credence, not noticing the switch, and then the cabin door flies open to reveal a dark-haired woman wearing a night dress and a life jacket who is Credence's aunt. So she picks up the baby that was switched, which is at this point baby Corvus, not realizing that it was in fact Switch. So at this point, I am going to read just a page from the screenplay. This is page 235, and this is scene 109. And we're at the lifeboat. It's 1901. It's at night. Child Lita, Irma, and baby Credence are in one boat. Credence's aunt and baby Corvus are in another. A huge wave is approaching. Child Lita watches as the lifeboat bearing Credence's aunt and baby Corvus is overturned. And then they close in on the surface of the water. A few survivors reappear, including Credence's aunt, but not baby Corvus. Credence's aunt pulls off her life jacket so she can dive. She does not reemerge. We close in through the surface of the water, past the drowning woman, and see the dark shape of a drowning baby trailing bubbles of magical light as he sinks, and his figure becomes, and then we see Lita's Bogart the sheet. So the drowning baby falling through the green sea light, hanging in the air at the mausoleum. Lita has conjured it. It has haunted her all of her life, and now she shows it to them. The orchid representing Lita on the Lestrange family tree twists around the branch labeled Corvus Lestrange until the leaves wither and die. And so that's the deep, dark secret that Lita has been keeping with her entire life. That is her, essentially, that is her Bogart. That is her worst fear and her worst memory. So now that we've broken that down, broken the story down a little bit, did that make more sense to you guys?
This was one of those things that made me feel like the screenplay was almost like required reading to understand the film, which kind of made me mad, but I was very confused on this entire storyline until I was like smacked in the face with it. And then I understood a little bit more. And then when I finally got to actually read it in front of me and I could go back and reread, and, I wasn't set up against the clock of a film that things were going to move on without me. That was when I fully understood it.
Yeah. Whenever I had time to sit down, go back and read it. I read it a couple of times. Now I understand. Now it's easier, even though I'm a visual learner, and I thought that seeing it on the screen would help. There was just a bunch of things happening in the movie where that wasn't my main focus, So, and it really needed to be. It really needed to be, like, you had to fully sit there and just be immersed in that one experience to really understand what was happening, because a lot of general fans just came out of that movie like, wait, what was that scene with the boat? Can you imagine if that was just like the general fans, and then us as well, we're like, wait, what just happened? So if we can't even dissect it, like, for people that are just going to watch a movie, they're kind of left wondering what the heck just happened.
I'm gonna have to explain it a lot to my mother when she eventually sees it. It's going to be a long talk.
Yeah, I kind of avoided that at Thanksgiving with my family. So there was this great document that's put together, Crimes of Grindelwald Theories, Details, and Questions, by Cindy Chi. And it's kind of a working document. It's always changing, but a lot of people are contributing, and you can contribute as well. Just email her, and we'll include the link to the document in our show notes as well. But it really breaks down like family connections and stuff like that. So she put together a wonderful timeline in a piece of this document. And it kind of puts stuff into perspective a little bit. Helps us understand like when this was going to happen. Because one of the major theories was that this boat was the Titanic. And at least that was my initial thought whenever I was in the movie. I was like, oh my God, they're on the Titanic.
You're not alone.
Which was, I was excited at first, you know, but to be honest, it opened up more questions. I was like, oh my God, well, what does that mean? You know, what is this 1912? I was trying to do the math in my head, but I didn't have all the information in front of me. Okay, so that leads to a whole bunch of theories in the fandom. This is why it's so important to have like facts straight and facts, you know, really concrete. And no inconsistencies in canon because it allows us to theorize about this. Theory number one that's been floating around the internet is that Grindelwald had lied to Credence. And I think that's what everybody is kind of hoping. Everybody that's really not buying into this theory is kind of hoping that they are not related at all. What do you guys think? Do you buy into that?
I will be very angry if he was lying, because I think that is a really big thing for J.K. Rowling to just throw out there to then take it back. And then I think it completely invalidates the second movie, because what was the point of the second film?
Yeah.
The whole plot, if there was one, was who the F is Credence. And then at the end of the movie, we find out who he is. And if they turn around in movie 4 and they're like, jokes, I'm never going to watch that second film again.
Yeah, I agree. I think it can't be a lie just because of storytelling. I think that's terrible if it is.
So the facts or the points behind this theory, and this is according to that document that we were just referencing, Grindelwald is known to be very persuasive and willing to say anything to get someone on his side. He had to have his guard changed like 3 times in 6 months, as we know, in the American prison, the American wizarding prison, because he was so persuasive. Fans explain the Phoenix at the end of the movie by saying it was like either transfigured, so it's a fake, or somehow the blood pact that Grindelwald and Dumbledore made gave Grindelwald enough of Dumbledore's blood to make the Phoenix come to Grindelwald. And then also, if it's a lie, I wonder where, you know, even Grindelwald gets the Aurelius name from. You know, did he just pick another random name that started with an A? Aberforth, Albus, Ariana, Aurelius. People who like this theory believe it's the most plausible because the timelines for a 4th Dumbledore sibling seem hard to comprehend. Like, Kendra was dead before Credence's birth, and Percival, which is the dad, is supposedly in Azkaban at this time, you know, and I don't know. I kind of find it hard that Rita Skeeter herself would have missed the info about hidden Dumbledore, but you know, Rita Skeeter got all of her information from Bathilda Bagshot for her book, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore, and it's possible that Bathilda didn't know everything. But one interesting piece is Aberforth talking about secrecy in his family. And whenever he's talking to Harry about this, he says, I knew my brother Potter. He learned secrecy at our mother's knee. So mother was very secret. Secrets and lies. That's how we grew up. And Albus, well, he was a natural.
Yes,
so.
yes. Yep. Read that piece, like, after I saw it, and I went, yep, there it is. That's Joe's ticket out of this nonsense.
Yeah, definitely so. I don't know.
I understand the Grindelwald lying to Credence storyline, well, theory, and I understand why people want to believe it. But again, I would just be really angry about it. I would just have a lot of issues.
Yeah, why? Okay, so that makes me wonder, why would Grindelwald even lie to Credence about it? You know?
Because when I was reading about this theory, people were like, of course Grindelwald would lie and tell Credence that he's a Dumbledore, because Grindelwald can't even fight Albus right now. So we need somebody else to go fight Albus. And what's one way to make a really angry man angry to get more revenge? Tell him that his brother that knew he existed is out here trying to kill him. And of course, so Credence will go fight Dumbledore on Grindelwald's behalf. Makes sense. I don't like it. Makes sense.
That's the most plausible thing. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't know. Gretchen, do you like this theory?
Oh, yeah, no. Like I said before, I don't like this one. I think some of it has to be true in some way. he's certainly manipulative, and I think he manipulates people. But actually, the thing I think about Grindelwald is I don't think he ever lies. He never straight out lies to anyone. The things he says are very twisted, and he never lies to Queenie. He manipulates her. So I think he's manipulating the same way we saw him manipulate in the first one when he was Graves. So I think it's all a manipulation, which means that, in fact, it has to be true. So I'm very interested in how it can be true.
Another theory, there's two more big theories. This one is my favorite. Credence has Ariana Dumbledore's Obscurus inside of him. Grindelwald isn't talking to Credence when he says, your brother. He's actually saying it to the Obscurus inside of Credence, which may be Ariana's. And then Grindelwald asks Queenie how he's doing before approaching Credence. Being Legilimens, Grindelwald should be able to read Credence himself, but maybe he couldn't communicate with the Obscurus. Queenie, on the other hand, could potentially hear it. So that's kind of one of the most, I guess, concrete pieces of evidence supporting the theory. This theory also...
I like this one, but is it plausible? Does this make any logical sense that this could be what happened?
I feel the exact same, Gretchen. I like it. I understand it. I could get behind it, but I don't know how it would hold up in court, so to speak.
Yeah. We do, so it's confirmed that, Obscurus can transfer hosts. That's what, remember, Newt was able to detach the Obscurus from that young girl he met in Sudan in the first Fantastic Beasts. Credence, this is another thing supporting the theory, is that Credence is the oldest Obscurial ever known. Usually they die before they're 10, in Ariana's case 14. So either Credence has immense magical ability, or he's not a traditional Obscurial. But Ariana, she was 14 whenever she died, so if she was an Obscurial, she also had immense power to control it, which I don't know if I buy into that one, because she really didn't. She couldn't control it. That was the thing. Some fans think that Grindelwald wanted to harness the power of Ariana's Obscurus, and so whenever she died, something may have happened that made him believe her Obscurus was attached onto another person. In Fantastic Beasts 1, Grindelwald seemed to think it was modesty. We just don't know if he knew Aurelius's name or existence yet. If he did, then he just didn't know the gender. And then there's a 2-year gap between Ariana's death and Credence's birth. So maybe the Obscurus was removed before her death, or somehow stored, kind of like Newt did. And in the movie, Dumbledore says an Obscurus grows in the absence of love as a dark twin, an only friend. If Credence has a real brother or sister out there who can take its place, he might yet be saved. And there's also an alternate dark twin theory that Ariana's Obscurus grew into Credence. And it also explains how the small wisp of Credence from Fantastic Beasts saved him, and he survived for movie 2. So, Obscuruses, I don't know. Obscuruses are very obscure. Grindelwald also says that Credence is the only entity alive that can kill Dumbledore. Not human, but entity. Is he, in fact, the most fantastic beast of this entire series?
So, what I originally was going to say is this theory has a lot behind it, but again, they would have to do a lot of explaining for it. And I don't know if the series is going to commit to all of that storytelling in film. Because if you think about it, we need to figure out if the Obscurus transferred to Credence, how it got from Godric's Hollow to the ship, was it in another child beforehand? We also know that, people with Obscurials inside of them, they don't live very long. So how is Credence alive for so long, so to speak? How did he last this long in his life? We need to get an explanation. We're basically going to have to all these backstories. They're going to have to cast a young Ariana and film all these flashback scenes. And from a film standpoint, I don't know. It sounds like a lot of work to explain this, and I don't know if they're going to do it.
So they could they could do two things with this, right? They could shoot the entire thing, which would take a good portion of another one of these movies, or they could explain it like they explained the Tale of the Three Brothers,
right,
and do it with kind of like an animated sequence like that. But the thing I wanted to say was, didn't the duel that killed Ariana, didn't that happen on a beach? Or am I confusing that with that fan film?
I thought it was in the house.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of the fan film.
Okay.
That didn't make any sense that they were on the beach.
Okay. I was like, well, that would have made sense to me. The Obscurus, flies
Didn't
away.
have to travel too far.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It was by the water.
Dang, I tried. I reached for it. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack with this particular theory. Like what Grindelwald says. Like, I mean, Jo's very careful with her writing and the way that she writes words. Grindelwald says that Credence is the only entity that can kill Dumbledore. Like, not human, not anything else, but like an entity. That's fascinating.
It is very clever wordplay for her.
Let's talk about the third theory, that Credence is somehow Grindelwald's child.
Ugh.
Yeah, this is a horrible theory, and I don't think I buy into it, but it has to be explored because it's certainly a possibility because we don't know the answers, right? So it would mean that Grindelwald at age 17 impregnated Ariana at age 14. So the problem with this is that Grindelwald met her early summer of 1899, and she died by the late summer. Hardly enough time to give birth to a child, unless she gave birth very prematurely, which I don't see that happening at all.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all. That, I mean, not much to that theory. Not much to
That's
discuss.
it. Yep.
Yeah. Theory 4. This is the last theory we're going to talk about today. That Credence is Dumbledore's half-brother. It's certainly plausible. The theory stands on the belief that Percival had a baby with somebody in Azkaban, or that he escaped Azkaban and had a child with another woman. Of course, disbelievers of the theory will argue that Sirius is the first to escape Azkaban, but Barty Crouch Jr. actually escaped before Sirius ever did by switching places with his mother. He just did it without anyone but his father knowing, so it's definitely possible that Percival could have escaped. If this was true, we still have no clue who his mother would be, and if Credence is indeed pure blood, this theory would make sense since Kendra was Muggle-born.
Yeah, this is the theory I personally get behind. I don't fully understand how it's going to be explained like any other theory, but I think it's the most plausible because, Credence's aunt on the boat taking the child away to America, I can see that as something where, someone was clearly ashamed that another child was brought in, and a legitimate child, or, that a child was somehow brought into the world in Azkaban and, wanted to remove the child from any potential criticisms or just judgment, an illegitimate Dumbledore child from the man that's in prison for killing 3 Muggles. Like, there's just a lot of, this kid would have a very tough life. Agreed. I could see why they would send it away.
Agreed.
I still think there's a lot to explain, though, of course. But I think this, again, in terms of film and storyline, might be the easiest to explain.
Yeah, I agree. This one seems the most logistically sound. It makes the most sense with canon as established. So I could see this one being the predominant theory.
And again, these theories that we read today are from this document by Cindy Chi. So I do want to go ahead and give this credit because there's a lot of good information in this document, which I'm sure we're going to be referencing over the next couple of episodes as we dive deeper into Crimes of Grindelwald. And I think that does wrap up this week's discussion. Of course, we would love to hear from you and your theories on Crimes of Grindelwald and Aurelius Dumbledore. Send us an email to staff@hogwartsradio.com. We'll be happy to read your email on the show and kind of dig into your theory a little bit more. And I think that's what we're going to continue next week is, digging into these different theories on Aurelius Dumbledore, talking about the movie a little bit more as well. For now, I believe that we're out of time this week, so we want to thank our guest for coming on the show. Lizzie, it's been so much fun. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Of course, and if anyone wants more Fantastic Beasts fun and podcasts, make sure to give us a listen over on SpeakBeasty. We had a really heated discussion about these theories as well, and we'll be covering this film for the next 2 years.
Literally for the next 2 years. That's all they speak about over there at SpeakBeasty is the Fantastic Beasts film series. Wonderful podcast brought to you over there by our good friends over at MuggleNet. So please go check them out. Give them a subscribe and a follow on social media.
And thank you again for having me. I loved discussing with new faces, new friends. Always a great time.
Yeah, definitely. Gonna have to. I think there's something coming in the future with both of our shows, and we'll announce that at a later time. But just kind of give people a teaser.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoiler alert. But we do want to thank everybody so much for tuning in today. Go ahead and follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. And don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. And if you're just listening to the show for the very first time, welcome. Thank you so much. We hope we didn't scare you or bore you, or both. But it's definitely fans like you that we continue to do this show for 10 plus years. Well, again, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Once again, I am Terrance Pinkston.
And I'm Gretchen Rush.
And we'll see you next week for episode 224. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was bloody brilliant.
Codswallop.